Hi, it's me, Andrej, and this is the Triumph Tiger 1200. Surprisingly, no one is paying me to be here, so I'm wondering what I'm doing here. But I figured that the Triumph is interesting, seriously, because when you watch reviews, Triumph has been aspiring to be a premium brand for several years now, and you could say it already is a premium brand, especially if you look at the motorcycles. What's the English word range? Meaning, what's the Polish word for range? Offering, that's a really ugly word. Their motorcycle offering, how they're made, and so on and so on. That move is one thing, but the result, that's another. And suddenly it turns out that the Triumph Tiger 900 was a sales hit in the adventure class in 2021. So I guess it's working. And this is supposed to be the next step to get even more established in the adventure class, and as usual to poach customers from who. Because everyone is aiming for the GS after all. So the Triumph Tiger 1200 is completely new, really, entirely new, because this motorcycle was created from scratch, which is also obvious visually, but for example, the styling doesn't matter to me at all. What intrigues me the most is the engine, because now the engine is like the one in the 900, at least in terms of concept. So we have a completely different crankshaft configuration, meaning the engine, it's not like it used to be when we had 3 cylinders in a row and it basically worked like a 4-cylinder inline engine, except that since the cylinders were a bit bigger, because there were 3 instead of 4, it had nice low-end torque. No, now it's even better, because it uses a T-plane crankshaft. So what that means is that the crank pins are arranged differently, and to put it simply, to help visualize it, it works a bit like in the Yamaha MT-09 in the tracers. Am I saying that right? No, I'm lying to you. Sorry. In the Yamaha R1 crossplane, where we have, and that's the distinctive thing, a 4-cylinder inline engine, but you can hear that it runs completely differently. Because in terms of sound and feel, it behaves a bit more like a V engine. So now that kind of technology is here in this motorcycle, and that impresses me because I remember a long time ago, I talked to an engineer from Yamaha, actually, and I asked, why don't others have this kind of solution in their engine? And he said, it's very hard, the technology. I break many engines. I think subtitles are needed for that, so this technology is very difficult. As you can see, it worked in the Triumph 900, and it should also work in the 1200, because what the 900 and 1200 were missing when it comes to off-road riding was that initial throttle response when you're coming out of a turn. You need to give it a little flick, dig yourself out of a situation. And I think now we're going to get that because the 900 has it. So we'll have more punch from the bottom, and then as the engine revs up, we'll get that inline engine character, which is also what usually works well on highways. I think that might also be why the Triumph Tiger 900 has been so well received in Poland, because we have a lot of long stretches, and with inline engines, riding for a long time with the throttle open is just a bit more pleasant. As for the performance itself, we have 150 horsepower and 130 Newton meters of torque, which is absolutely sufficient. Those 130 Newton meters will definitely make a bigger impression than the maximum power, because we know that the competition can have more maximum power. And here it's also a personal matter whether you actually need that much power to teleport from country to country, from continent to continent. I have my own opinion on this. We'll see when I get to ride this motorcycle in a few months, how much bite there is in the upper rev range. But moving on, a completely new frame, a completely new rear suspension, and the suspension is semi-active, which we could say is somewhat standard these days in the adventure class. But this one is from Showa, so if I remember correctly, it's probably similar to what's in the Africa Twin. I mean, in terms of hardware, the components are very similar. When it comes to the settings, it's definitely something completely different. It was made specifically for Triumph, but what intrigues me the most is the rear suspension, because the motorcycle still uses a drive shaft. So it's a big, I don't know if it's a wow or not a wow. It's nice that the drive shaft stayed, because we don't have much choice when it comes to adventure class motorcycles with a drive shaft, basically. It's just the GS after all. And a lot of people still want to have a drive shaft for touring, but what's most important is that this suspension is called trilling or something like that, and it has a lever linkage system that, to my eye, looks like it could really work well on small bumps, while also handling big bumps. And I'm really curious how it works in practice, because this could be a hit. The previous Tiger 1200 had a single-sided swing armlets, call it the classic solution, because it was a single-sided swing arm and a shaft drive. Here, it looks very complicated. And I think it could be quite effective, especially when it comes to off-road riding, because that's where you need the most traction on those small, various uneven surfaces. Triumph boasts about the Tiger's weight reduction, that they've managed to lower the weight so spectacularly. Well, yes, but it's like they started from a very high point. In other words, the previous Tiger was a very heavy motorcycle. This one is no longer a very heavy motorcycle. They've shed 25 kilograms, although that probably also depends on the version, which I'll talk about in a moment. But most importantly, they boast that they're lighter than the competition with a drive shaft, meaning they're simply lighter than the GSA Adventure. This motorcycle is the Rally Explorer version with a 30-liter fuel tank and all those gadgets. As it stands, it weighs 261 kilograms with a full tank of fuel, or about 90% fuel in the tank, which in my opinion is just a normal result for this class, keeping to the standard, and it should be completely fine when you start rolling the motorcycle, as far as maneuvering and so on is concerned. The lightest is probably the GT, 240 kilograms, also wet and ready to ride. And compared to the Rally version, the difference is that the GT has a 19-inch front wheel and cast wheels. The Rally version has a 21-inch wheel, spoked wheels, and just like there's the GT version, there's the GT Pro, which has a bit more equipment, and the GT Pro Explorer. And the Explorer has a large 30-liter tank, while the other one has 20 liters, but I'm good at remembering numbers. Similarly, we have the Rally with a smaller 20-liter tank and the Rally Explorer with a 30-liter tank, and the pricing is nicely spread out like that. I think the prices start at 77 and go up to 96, ending with the motorcycle that has practically everything, because cruise control, interesting. The cruise control is not adaptive, and I suspect that's just for now, because we already have a radar at the back and these funny little lights here that show the blind spot, indicating that something is in your blind spot. And if you ride like a true Pole, well, they just keep blinking all the time, non-stop, because that's just how people sometimes drive in Poland. So there's no radar at the front yet, but I bet my hand it's only a matter of time. And considering how people still react to active cruise controls, maybe that's not really a downside. Interestingly, the windshield is adjusted manually, all in the name of reducing weight. The previous one was electrically adjustable. In my opinion, it's faster and more convenient. You just grab it and set it however you want. Cool solution. Very, very simple. I wonder if you could also mount an additional navigation device to this crossbar, but I guess that's becoming a thing of the past these days, since you can just use the built-in navigation by connecting the motorcycle to an app. What caught my attention is that the brakes are Brembo Stylema, as you can see. Nice, super cool. And the master cylinder is Magura, not Brembo. Very interesting. So maybe thanks to this, we'll notice some difference in how the brakes work between different brands. Because usually when Brembo Stylema brakes are installed everywhere with a Brembo master cylinder, all the brakes actually work the same. And the only difference, for example, is in how the ABS works. In the way the cornering ABS operates, because of course this motorcycle has cornering ABS, traction control, acceptable riding modes when it comes to engine characteristics, and the suspension behavior in the semi-active version, because the base versions have regular, fully adjustable traditional suspension. Crash bars are also standard. I assume this is a mounting point for something, but that's basically all there is to the inclusion of the crash bar. Important or unimportant things, well, the discussion is mostly about the equipment, because the more expensive version has heated seats. That is, of course, important. What I learned today is that the rear plate for the top case is floating, which means that at higher speeds, it should perform better. Because unfortunately, the truth is that a motorcycle can have a lot of horsepower, but once you put a top case on it and hit the highway, it's just not very pleasant. Here we'll see in practice how it works, but what interests me most in practice is the engine. The new chassis means rear suspension, rear wheel traction, because I think this could be a real hit. If anyone is going to challenge the market leaders, I think the Tiger has a pretty good chance. That's why I'm here, because I'm curious, because it's great when something is happening on the market, because we have a motorcycle that doesn't have too few cylinders, but not too many either. It has an engine that combines the character of a two-cylinder and a four-cylinder even more. And then there's the chassis, and a brand that wants to be premium and is premium, because the craftsmanship of Triumphs, I've always said, you look at it and you can tell they have to put in the effort, and they really do. Exactly, that's very important. I noticed that there's no radiator here anymore. That also shows that this is a completely different design. The radiators have been moved to the sides. I think it's for several reasons, but the most important is maintaining thermal comfort. because that's a hugely important thing in adventure motorcycles these days. With all the emission standards, since these engines get really hot, the advantage here is that we have all the cylinders in front of us. That's already one benefit. We don't have anything here generating heat for us. And the radiators are also positioned on the sides with inlets directed in such a way that the air is supposed to go out to the sides and not heat up, you know what. Pretty much everything, really. And at the same time, I think that since there's no radiator here, there's also a lower chance of it being damaged by stones if we really go to places like Kazakhstan, Mongolia, and similar destinations. And if the crash bars are solid enough, we should be able to check then the radiators shouldn't get damaged, because I can see they're actually tucked in quite deep. As always, you can find more information on our website. If you're interested in the technical specifications of this motorcycle and so on, you can either check our website or go to Triumph site and click around. You can let your imagination run wild. I can already see more people outside the showroom wanting to see this bike, which just shows how much interest it's generating. If I forgot something, sorry about that. Feel free to correct me in the comments. I'll respond and try to improve in the future. Or maybe not, because the most important thing is to finally get to ride this motorcycle. But it's cold, and there are no premieres. Oh God, something like that. We're waiting for the first test rides, and then we'll be able to say more about this machine. And later, do a comparison test here in Poland. That's all. Take care. Bye.